Hello everybody, I'm Avian and we are currently going through our how to build a Stardew mod. Today I want to talk about the content file that just lives in your top level of your file folder. It's where you tell your mod what files you have, what you want to include. If you have a smaller mod, you might just have everything in your content instead of having several different JSON files. On my Father Joseph Garden Cottage mod, I've used it more to tell it where to find my individual files because I have dialogue and events and schedules and everything like that. So this is my current Garden Cottage content. I have a config menu. I have where I've loaded in all of my JSON files where I'm telling it what I'm doing. I have a commented out section for something I'm currently working on to add a new location. And then because I don't have a lot of tokens, I have just a little token section at the bottom. If you do have a lot of tokens in your mod, you might want to make your own tokens JSON file. So I'll just start at the top and I'll do smaller sections one by one in a later video. This is just an overview. I'm actually going to show you real quick. I'm going to back out here. Into one of my smaller mods so you can see what a different version might look like. Where's my second? Gotta find it. Here we go. So this is my raccoon trash bear sprite replacement content where I have pretty much everything in my content file. And all that was I was just replacing a single image and a single sprite. So everything for that particular mod is right here in my content. When we compare that to the content JSON for my Father Joseph mod, you can tell there's a whole lot more. I have a configuration setting for my portrait appearances. Most people will put their config settings right at the top because if you go in to change your config and select your preferences when you're installing the mod, it's easier, I found, to have that at the top when you're reading through because then you know right where you go. You can read your little description, choose what you want. So that's why I put my config menu at the top. We then get into the changes right here. This is where you tell it, just like here, what you're changing, what files to include, changes because you're technically changing things in the vanilla mod. The first thing I have in my changes section is where I am setting up where to find the portraits for my different config settings. So I have a classic style, which is a default option. I have a Fire Emblem style, and I have what I call the vanilla recolor option because my very first run through, I had just recolored a couple of classic vanilla portraits and didn't really want to completely 100% get rid of the artwork when I redid the portraits. So it's now a config option. The next section is what I have given the log name to be includes. Log name, when you're going through your errors section, if something happens, your log name will pop up. And in this case, if includes popped up, I would know to go right here to this section, and that's where the error was. I'm going to just really quick put the view in word wrap so you can see all of my includes. So this is every file I currently have in my mod. I have told it action include, and it knows it's going to go here and make sure that that file is loaded in. So this is going to be, in my case, all of my location data, house string, character data, dialogue, schedules, sprite appearances, objects, special orders, mail, compatibility patches for when I was adding things to make sure there weren't conflicts with other mods. Every JSON file I have in my mod is loaded in my include section. My objects, because that is loading a specific image file. I've made that its own little thing. And then the next thing I have is loading in to a blank JSON file. And this I've covered in another video. It just helps prevent errors in a couple spots. My personal preference is to load everything in the blank and then make changes on the individual files up here. I found it's helped me prevent a number of errors that way. So this is saying my log name is blanks. If I had an error in this section, that's the log name that would pop up. I am loading in this information, all of the files I'm loading in, and then from file tells it that it's going to go to data/blank JSON and load all of these from that blank JSON file. And then similar concept with events files where I needed to load in specific event locations for things that at the time in which I made the file weren't currently available. And then the only difference here is that I had to set a priority, which is this right here. What that tells it is to load it in after the default files have been loaded in, and that helps prevent conflicts where if you have two files that are trying to load at the same time, it's going to choose not to load either one of them. Whereas if you have one that's set at the default setting and then one that has a priority of high, medium, low, it's going to load your default and then it's going to load your high, medium, low, because that tells it what order to load it in, depending on what you have actually set. I also have a section that I'm currently working on. That is why it's commented out. On comments, your double backslash will make a comment on a specific line, whereas if you do the backslash and the star, everything from the backslash star to the next section of star backslash will be contained in a single comment. I have this commented out because the location that I've been building is not ready for testing, and this just prevents it from being loaded in until it's ready for testing, and it will prevent errors for any of my test files and things based on this particular section. And then last but not least, because I don't have a lot of tokens, I've included a token section in my content as opposed to having its own section. So that's just a rundown of a basic content. You may set yours up differently depending on the mod you're building. You may have just one little thing in there. Yours may end up being triple the length mine currently is. Do what's best for you, but as long as you have a content.json, that's where your mod is going to go to look for initial things like what files is it loading in. Is there a config menu it needs to take care of? Things like that. I hope this information was helpful, and until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day.